Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on News X World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. The United States is working with the Sudanese Army and RSF to secure a 3-month humanitarian truce after the RSF captured Al-Fashir in North Darfur. Washington, alongside Saudi Arabia, Egypt and the UAE, aims to end a war that has killed over 40,000 people and displaced 40 million, creating the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, the UAE presidential advisor Anwar Gargash has admitted that the Manama dialogue that everyone made a mistake in failing to condemn the 2021 Sudanese coup, which he said fueled today's civil war between the army and RSF in Sudan. A UN-backed hunger monitor has confirmed famine conditions in Sudan's Al-Fashir and Kadugli, marking the first official designation of famine in these cities. The IPC report says that 21.2 million Sudanese, about 45% of the population, faces acute food insecurity as the war between the RSF and the army drives mass hunger, displacement, and atrocities. Guinea's military leader Mamadi Doumbouya has filed his candidacy for the December 28th presidential election, despite earlier promising not to run after seizing power in a 2021 coup. His bid to run was enabled by a new constitution approved in September that has sparked outrage from opposition groups. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan was sworn in after a disputed October 29th election that has sparked deadly protests, with the UN reporting at least 10 deaths in Dar es Salaam, Shinyanga, and Morogoro. Meanwhile, opposition parties rejected the results as fraudulent. Kenya's Finance Minister John Mbadi has stated that the government will hold follow-up meetings with the IMF to secure a new program after its $3.6 billion deal expired earlier this year. Nigeria has stated that it welcomes U.S. support in its fight against Islamist insurgents, but warned that any assistance must respect its sovereignty after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened possible military action over the treatment of Christians. However, analysts noted that the majority of victims of Islamist attacks in Nigeria have been Muslims. Gaza's only mental hospital is overwhelmed with more than 100 patients daily, many of them children, as the region struggles under ongoing violence despite the October 10th ceasefire, while Israeli fire killed 3 Palestinians near Rafah on Monday, further testing the fragile US-backed truce as tensions remain high. Now we start with Africa. Nigerians across the religious spectrum are reacting to U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of military intervention over the killings of Christians in the country. Roughly evenly split between Christians and Muslims, the most populous African nation is home to myriad conflicts, but claims of Christian persecution in Nigeria have found traction online among the U.S. and European rights in recent months. This comes in the light of President Donald Trump's statement that he had asked the U.S. Department of War to prepare a possible plan of attack. Let's listen into what citizens have said about these developments.
There are some conspiracy theories about even the purpose of this announcement by the President Trump, but we don't believe in rumor or hearsay. We believe the President of America should listen to good voices from this country, reliable and honest voices from this country, and rethink over this his so-called decision.
Mr. Trump has interior motive. It's not to our own advantage. There are more to it. So I think, if you ask me, I advise Mr. President, our President, Tinubu, to find a political solution to it.
When you talk about killing in place like Plateau, in place like Benue, where you have almost 80% of their population as Christian, then if you are now saying it's not genocide, then you are not being fair.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Osaniyin Taiwo. He's a policy and strategic implementation expert, joins us live from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you very much, Osaniyin, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this news, what is the reality in the ground in Nigeria? Is it true that the reports of Christian and Muslims being killed by Muslims, or what's going on over there?
Thank you for asking me. It's always a pleasure being a news expert. Let me start by saying that the current situation in Nigeria today has anticipated right from 2009, and Nigeria, excuse me, has been faced with security challenges from the year 2009. These security challenges are not far from relatable consequences of insurgency, such as Islamic groups such as Boko Haram. Some are affiliated to ISIS and what have you. Also, we must also realize that the country Nigeria is also faced with other security challenges like kidnapping, incessant killings in different parts of the world. But considering the fact that Nigeria is a cross multi-ethnic and religious society, it's always very important that we must be very careful at which we try to resolve these challenges. However, on the flip side, Donald Trump and his statement made during the weekend, sometime last week, it only shows that two things. He doesn't understand the basics of the Nigerian challenges, the basics of the Nigerian security challenges. Are we saying that there are killings happening in Nigeria? Yes. Are we saying there are kidnappings happening in Nigeria? Yes. Are Nigerians being killed? Yes. Are Christians being killed? Yes. Are Muslims being killed? Certainly, yes. But the major challenges are not because of the killings. The major challenges is because it only undertones the fact that the current situation in the country is overlong for a country like Nigeria to be facing this. And presidents after president come to make different promises to avert and reduce these situations, but we do not see anything positive on ground. Having said that, is Donald Trump's statement really the best solution? Well, I would say yes and no. Yes, on the side of the fact that Nigeria needs international support. We cannot deny that factor that the Nigerian government needs the essence and the history of this crisis is very key in resolving the situation of the country. And if Donald Trump doesn't understand the history and the antecedent of where the crisis is starting from and thinks it's just from a part of the genocidal point of view, it may be wrong. And not only that, if there is no cooperation between the Nigerian government and the United States of America government in averting this current situation, they may not actually get the right solution. On the flip side, Nigerians are also afraid, considering the fact that the United States historically have not been a country that can be trusted when it comes to peacekeeping, considering their antecedents in Libya, in Burkina Faso, and other countries in the global East. And this is also giving the Nigerians this fright and this belief that this attack may also be from another different perspective from the United States of America, which is Donald Trump. Also, in addition, must also forget the fact that Donald Trump has a rascally behavior in his setup and may not want to listen and carry out this approach in a very positive manner. Having said that, it's also important that we must see from the light that Donald Trump seems to be a desperate president, considering his Global Peace Award that was denied, and wants to actually show a bit of muscle around the global world today, showing that he wants to keep peace, but his approach may not be the best approach.
And what do you make of U.S. threats, military intervention influencing Nigeria's internal religious and political dynamics? Is there any politicians in Nigeria also reacting to this? And what do you think of the motive behind this U.S.'s threat?
Well, a lot of Nigerian politicians have been reacting. We have had different ministers commenting, different governors restating the need for cooperation and unity, the need to come together as a country, rather than looking at this from a religious perspective. We've had different governors, one of the governors, Nasarawa State Governor, Suluhu, Osun State Governor, Adeleke, and a couple of ministers have also spoken and heard their voices. But the only problem I have is some Nigerians who are insensitive of the current situation and the current political climate, the global political climate in which they make some certain comments, sometimes sounds a bit as a threat to Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't give a damn in the real sense of it. If he says it, he will do it. But we're also very careful as a country and how to actually create a necessary collaboration with the United States of America. And that is why the good news is, just this morning, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has instructed the security agencies to do immediate screening for ambassadors in the country so that they're posted, because Nigeria does not have an international face. We do not have any ambassador representing the country in any part of the world today, and that is a very big lacuna in the current state of international relationship and within and between Nigeria and other countries. So this is probably one of the swiftest development that has just occurred this morning. However, it is also very important to state categorically that the killings in Nigeria must stop. Threats from Donald Trump may not be the way forward. Collaboration from the United States may be the way forward. But at the same time, it seems sometimes to be that some of the people or some of the Nigerian politicians are probably afraid, considering the fact that some years ago, the United States and the FBI and actually listed some Nigerian politicians who were actually on the watch for sponsoring terrorists and terrorism in the country. Maybe that is their fear, that considering the fact that Donald Trump may have this information right in his hands, and so they are probably fearful to actually want Donald Trump to come to the country. But having said that, whatever the situation may be, one thing is certain: Nigerians are being killed, and the killings must stop. And the killings must stop immediately.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Osani and Taiwo, for sharing that powerful message with us on NewsX World and sharing that insight all the way from Nigeria. Now we move on to our next news. We stay in the region. The Global Hunger Monitor has confirmed famine in Al-Fashir, the Sudanese city taken by the paramilitary rapid support forces after a lengthy siege, as well as Kadugli, another besieged city in Sudan's south. The finding marks the first time that the UN-backed Integrated Food Security Phase Classification (IPC) has determined that these cities are in famine condition. The UN has also confirmed famine in camps for displaced people in Al-Fashir, the capital of Darfur. The IPC is the internationally recognized standard for measuring the severity of hunger crisis, and its findings have provoked criticism from Sudan's government, which is backed by the army. Now, for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Tolit Atiya. He's an African affairs expert, joins us live from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you very much, Doctor, for joining us. Welcome to NewsX World. Now, looking at this What more can you tell us about the reality in the ground, and what role should international actors, including US, UAE, Saudi Arabia, play in negotiating sustainable human truce in Sudan? What do you make of today's statements from UAE that everyone made a mistake in not contracting the crisis back when it started?
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to participate in this program. What UAE is saying is actually very interesting, because from other quarters, UAE itself is being accused by the Sudanese for interference in these affairs, and they are actually being seen as the key bottleneck, towards the question of finding a lasting solution and peace for Sudan. One thing I want to say is that there are about three things that need to be addressed. The very first one is how this conflict is being framed. For the international world or players, including the UN, to understand this conflict very well and be able to come out with appropriate interventions, and which must be urgent, because the main culprit of this conflict are the ordinary people. I live and work from Kampala in Uganda, where in the last 3 years we have increasingly seen numbers of refugees from Sudan moving into Uganda in hundreds and their thousands. So the issue here is that, how is this conflict being framed? To the international community, it looks like this is basically an insurgency or a revolt from within the sovereign territories of Sudan, given the Rapid Defense Force and then the National Army. But I think there is now clear evidence that this is the wrong way to frame this conflict. I think this conflict, in my view, and from what I'm reading from other observers, is that the definition of this conflict and its implications needs to be expanded. This conflict needs to be seen in the continued lens of colonization. Stories are told of how the USA, in having interest in extending their hegemony to the UAE, moved in, created military bases, and opened up arms trade. And in the process, they courted the royals and the rulers who are living in abundance and opulence. And I think these rulers, in a way, picked a page from this doctrine and have tried to extend their own hegemony, down south. And there are these accusations of the Rapid Defense Forces being sponsored by the United Arab Emirates. And this is basically in quest for minerals and commodities. And I think there is some water in this argument. So in this way, I also begin to think that the whole quest for further decolonization of Africa, especially seen in the nuance of neocolonization through corporates and businesses, needs to be tackled head on. That is one. The other dimension to this conflict is the question of the Africa security architecture, as you would want to see it from the preposition of the AU and its disposure. I think the Peace and Security Commission of the African Union has completely failed. It has collapsed. Its strategies are shambolic, and I think cannot cannot hold the pillars for peace anymore. And I think this needs to be addressed very, very seriously. The UN Security Council needs to take interest on how the African Union how the African Union security architecture stands and is disposed, because it's just not only Sudan. We have seen Mali going to smoke. We've seen Burkina Faso going to smoke. We've seen the riots in Kenya, and now we are seeing what is happening in Tanzania. And I think what is causing the biggest problem is this principle of non-interference, because democracy is being shoveled. And when the African Union continues to insist that neighboring countries and the international community and stakeholders are going to be bound by that principle of non-interference, then in a way they actually give opportunity for the dictators to have a freehold and leeway. And I think this needs to be addressed. The third and last thing, which is really crucial, is that the conduct of this war is really barbaric. The amount of infrastructure that has been brought down, its impact on humanity.
Yes.
The crisis that we are seeing now is, especially the famine, the prolonged drought, is something that definitely calls for international intervention without any delay.
Yes.
Because otherwise, the actual bedrock of international relations has been put right in the dock here.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Tolit Attia for sharing that thorough explanation from all angles on this topic. Thank you very much. Please stay with us as we come back to you for another discussion as well. Now we stay in the region. A 2-month-old fuel blockade by Al-Qaeda-linked terrorists has paralyzed the capital of Mali, raising concerns that the jihadists might try eventually to impose their rule on the West African country. Security analysts have said that the group known as Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, which has been operating for months within 50 kilometers of Bamako, currently has neither the intention nor the military capability to seize the city of 4 million people, which it briefly attacked last year. But reports say that the JNIM strategy of gradually starving Bamako of fuel, forcing schools to shut and depriving businesses of diesel-generated electricity poses the gravest challenge yet to the military leaders who took power in 2021. According to reports, the jihadists' likely goal is to trigger another coup. It would be Mali's third since 2020, further depriving the country of a viable power center and allowing JNIM to amass more weapons and funds. Now we move on to Tanzania. Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan has been sworn in for a second term following a landslide victory in a disputed election that prompted deadly protests across the country. Hassan has taken the oath of office during a ceremony at a military base in the capital, Dodoma. The event was closed to the public following the violence that accompanied a vote in which the two main opposition challengers were barred from running. Meanwhile, tensions remain high in the commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. Following 3 days of election protests, shops were shuttered along nearly empty streets, with most people remaining at home. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Tolit Attia. He's an African affairs expert, joins us live from Kampala, Uganda. Thank you very much, Doctor, for staying with us. Now looking at this news, what are the potential implications of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's second term, and how might this exclusion of opposition candidates in election affect the country's democratic legitimacy?
Now, thank you once again.
Thank you.
Actually, the events in Tanzania have literally surprised everybody in the region. Tanzania is the only country since it attained its independence in 1961 that has been seen as an oasis of peace, if I can use that word, because all the other countries neighboring Tanzania, DR Congo, Uganda, Kenya, have all had their fair share of crisis and affront to democracy and turmoil. This has not happened in Dar es Salaam. And I think this goes back or brings to mind what the theorists of peace label as the levels of peace. Some have argued that, for instance, the absence of war does not mean that there is actually peace. And I think this is exactly what has happened in Tanzania. We have seen a place, a polity, a geography, a country that has seemed so tranquil, so quiet. But many people who know the inside of Tanzania have always warned that something is simmering below. It's just like having a cup of porridge and you have this layer that forms on top and you're lured to believe that the heat has been knocked out. That is not true. The events in Dar es Salaam clearly showed that, by the way, democracy is really akin and fused to social relations. In as long as people begin to feel that they are being trampled upon, they are being downtrodden, there are two statements that came out. The South African election observers, in their statement, clearly concluded that the events in Tanzania and what they saw was far away from a free and fair election. The European Union observers concluded the same way. And I think to add credence to this is the way the Tanzania government responded. One thing they have done in this era of technology was to go and knock out the internet. In knocking out the internet, they believed that probably this cuts communication and disorients maybe the demonstrators. But what is very interesting, right from looking at demonstrations years back, say in the Arab Springs, has clearly showed that sometimes when community anger builds, like it has now done in Tanzania, especially where people's participation, opportunity to participate in democracy are being denied, you actually do not need to organize. You actually do not need leaders. What happens is that the riots are basically simultaneous. And there are very cunning ways in which this kind of demonstrations take place. Because we saw, like in Egypt, in Algeria, in Tunisia, people resorted to neutral areas like the churches, community halls, and continued. And why am I saying this? I would want to think that the curfew that has been called in Dar es Salaam, the knockout of the internet, which are the first victims of affront to democracy, may not necessarily deter, the anger and the spirit to revolt. I think we are yet to see more in the capital, Dar es Salaam, and the other capitals of Tanzania. What does this mean for the neighboring countries, Uganda and Tanzania? Uganda and Kenya. We already know that Tanzania has closed its nearest border of Namanga with Kenya, because with the events that happened in Kenya recently, the youth in Kenya are still hot in pursuit for any peace credentials. So I am sure they have linked up with the Tanzanian youth in one way or the other. Suluhu, wherever she is, even after swearing in, she must be very wary. What does this portend for Uganda? We are going into an election that is highly charged in January, and my guess is as good as yours.
Right.
We could just have another scene of riots in Uganda.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Tolit Atia for joining us as an African affairs expert and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. According to a report by the Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries, Zimbabwe's annual inflation rate could halve from current levels by the end of 2025. Driven by a stable local currency supported by high gold prices, annual inflation in Zimbabwe measured in the Zimbabwe gold currency fell sharply to 32.7% in October from 82.7% in September, as per CCI. This projection is attributed to negative month-on-month inflation in recent months and a stable Zimbabwe's gold currency bolstered by surging gold prices. As per some, gold production in Zimbabwe is forecasted to surpass the record 38.4 tons achieved in 2024, driven by high bullion prices. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching News X World for more news updates from around the world.